Today I'm going to share some tips and strategies that I use in my accordion book practice. And now that you've made your own accordion book, perhaps these might be supportive and helpful to you. My collaborator and I, Todd Elkin, developed a zine that you can download in a link that's below that shows you how to get started in your accordion book. It tells you how to make it, and it also gives you some strategies to use in your accordion book practice. What I want to mark today is not so much steps or tricks, but more approaches, 5 approaches that you might use in your process. And these approaches, Todd and I spent some time a couple of years ago putting together this artist book that was curated from 10 years of our accordion book practice. And we put them down here in this book, and I'm going to go in and out of this book, share little bits of it with you through the course of this video. So the first place that I often start with my students is this place that we call things talk to me, being alert to what catches and holds your attention. It's really important that when you start with your accordion books, you start with something that is alive for you. Don't overthink it. It could be an image, a quote, a question, something you collected, a free write, something that caught and held your attention. I often tell my students that this requires a couple of things. One, you need to be aware of yourself as a compass as you orient yourself to the world around you. And 2, you have to trust that what catches and holds your attention has value and can be something that you latch on to as a way to get started. So things talk to me needs a couple of things. It needs being alert. It's an act of extreme noticing. It can be about building collections, gathering. Anything can become a collection. An artwork, seeds, conversations, any of these. So the mode of things talk to me is really a gathering mode, a collecting mode, and getting into a flow, getting started and following a train of thought. So here in my accordion book, I talk about trees that catch and hold my attention. So I'm going to read a section. Trees talk to me. They will interrupt my conversation in mid-sentence and force me to marvel at their shapes, smells, seed pods, and sometimes loud fruits and sometimes silent flowers. Over the years of being grabbed by trees and plants, I've learned to read their clues and tricks for enticing me, as well as all the insect, plant, bird, and animal collaborators they lure and put to use. Plants have developed great skill and tools for grabbiness in order to survive, from their flashy flower advertisements to the spiky seeds they latch on to you and want you to take them for a walk. I have become a willing participant in that fan club, propelled by their ability to hold my attention. And this, you'll start to realize that some things start to get persistent. So, just to give you an example, here I spent some time just collecting leaves and marking them and looking at them closely and writing about them and taking a segment of those leaves here, color matching them, and also looking and thinking about time, thinking about the relationship of these leaves as they become interconnected in various cycles. So this is just an example of something that caught and held my attention and is something that I followed with and followed through on. In every one of my books, I have a pocket, and invariably in those pockets, there will be some leaves and some drawings of leaves that I keep working on and collecting, leaves, plants, flowers, elements like this. I want to share also a couple of resources and some books. So this is a great book by an outsider artist, Michael Bernard, and he has, this entire book is all his collections about the fears of his life. And again, those are the things that talk to him and hold his attention. This is a great book about many different illustrators that also document their life on a regular basis. Kerry Smith is fantastic with how to be an explorer of the world, and during this lockdown, she has started an exploration of the day, which is on her Instagram feed and on her website, because teachers in Italy asked her for things that their students could engage with, and they're really fun. And then this one, which is called The Intelligent Eye, a book about close looking, about slowing down and noticing, which is really the crux, the very essence of Things Talk to Me, being alert to what grabs and holds my attention. So the next phase or the next approach I want to draw attention to is the approach of mapping. And Todd and I call this mapping the terrain, exploring, guiding, and getting lost. This requires a very different mode. It's a mode not of gathering and collecting, which is Things Talk to Me, but it's a mode of spending time, expanding, revisiting, sorting, connecting, marking, building. There's two kinds of mapping, right? There's the embodied mapping, which is really more in a flow. It's more the act of exploration. And then there is a more analytical mapping, which is about sorting, about connecting, about marking, etc. And I want to mark that when we map, part of it is this act of exploration. Part of it is the act of guiding, and part of it is the act of getting lost. And I want to read a quote, and this is from Rebecca Solnit's The Field Guide to Getting Lost. That thing, the nature of which is totally unknown to you, is usually what you need to find, and finding it is a matter of getting lost. Getting lost was not a matter of geography so much as identity. A passionate desire, even an urgent need to become no one and anyone. So while you're mapping, there are a couple of strategies to point out. One of the strategies is to start developing visual metaphors. That's a house that you see there. Visual metaphors for things that come up over and over again. So I have a house stencil that I've made, and you'll see that this house comes up over and over again, because another thing that I am alert to and catches and holds my attention, it's also part of my research, is looking at migration and the dynamics of migration and people's relationship to place. And here in this book, place, belonging, inclusive, are things that come up as themes for me. And I've even set up some codes in here that allow me to code my thinking, these color-coded dots that allow me to code my thinking as I'm engaging in some amount of mapping that takes place. The mapping might happen across multiple books. This mapping around migration for me is been years. I've been thinking about it for over 10 years. So you'll see aspects of it through your book, and they become a code through your book. You know where things are because there's a visual metaphor that continues to develop across your books. But there's also some other strategies, right? So of developing these, and part of it is here right now in this current crisis. India has been there's been a lot of dynamics around migration that we have been struggling with, and I have been expanding many different aspects of that. But here, as you can see, the strategy I've used is just playing with scale. Things that are really important, I've kind of made them larger in scale in terms of text, but I've also developed a couple of other visual metaphors. These feet that I use this stamp for are migrants on the move. So you see this visual metaphor of the house. I have drawn from Sean Tan's Arrival, which is an amazing book, and I've also developed another visual metaphor. So all of these acts, whether it's manipulation of scale, whether you're working with text, whether you're developing a visual metaphor, be it the foot or the house in this case, or developing color codes, these allow you to keep track of your mapping. So these are some books that I keep going back to over and over again. I already mentioned Rebecca Solnit's Field Guide to Getting Lost, but she has a great map, a book called the San Francisco Atlas, Infinite Cities, that is a good resource. The Map as Art is a great resource. And Linda Barry, What It is also a great way to map. What I love about Linda Barry's work and how it links to the work that we're trying to do in Accordion book practices, she creates these collages. They're not linear collages at all. They're much more exploratory maps. So she says, what are thoughts? And she just explores them in a collage. What are thoughts made of? Again, here, this is explored in a collage. Another book that I can't seem to find, but I think is a great book, is called The Maps of the Imagination by Peter Turchi, and I want to read a quote. We organize information on maps in order to see our knowledge in new ways. As a result, maps suggest explanations, and while explanations reassure us, they also inspire us to ask questions, consider other possibilities. To ask for a map is to say, tell me a story. So the next mode is about exchange. What happens in an exchange? Exchanges are moments where we move out of our little bubble and we start to interact with the world around us, we start to interact with others, and it allows for interconnections to take place, it allows for change in thinking. Often it's about getting ourselves into a zone of discomfort. So a lot of times when I'm thinking about exchange, it's marking where we're going over our own sense of what we know. And Todd and I, in our book, we've explored the idea of exchange with the metaphor of brackish water. What happens when sweet water and salt water start to engage with each other? That becomes a really rich zone. So there are all these great words here. Border towns, giving, liminal space, ecosystem, edge, trading zones, translation, love, exchange as art, causality, swap, flow, fault lines, tricky middle, perspectives, brackish water, negotiating equity, dialogue. All of these are ways to mark exchange. I also want to read a quote from Margaret Wheatley, and she says, talk to people you know, talk to people you don't know, talk to people you've never talked to. Be intrigued by the differences you hear. Expect to be surprised. Treasure curiosity more than certainty. So the mode of exchange is really the mode of curiosity. And this is a quote from her book, Simple Conversations to Restore Hope in the Future. One of the ways that I began to be alert to the fact that this idea of place, belonging, migration was coming up for me is partly because I started coding it. And Todd and I developed a yellow dot as a color code for exchange across our books. We were coding each other's books and we were coding across our books. And these yellow dots of exchange became a way for me to really see, oh, this is coming up over and over again in my books. So the codes allow you to see patterns and surface patterns and develop ways that you might want to engage with them over and over. One of the artists I go to often is Sean Tan. He is an amazing artist and illustrator, and one of my absolute favorite books of all time is The Arrival, where he uses just image as a way to so poignantly tell the story of migration. Sean Tan explores place, migration, belonging, many of the ideas that I'm interested in, and many of the ideas that really encompass the discomfort, the relationship, the interconnectedness of exchange. So the next approach or the next marker is what would an artist do? Teachers and students as contemporary artists. Todd and I, in our education practice, really believe strongly that artists are proactive and fantastic role models for teachers and students. They take part in conversations about the critical issues of our time. And if we were to break down, what is it that artists do? They do so many things. So listen, and these are some of the words that we've come up with. Critique, they play tricks. Artists bridge, they catalyze, they observe, they inform, they protest, they predict, they trigger, narrate, translate, explore multiple perspectives, inquire, analyze, persuade, hybridize, invent, reframe. So these are all the proactive ways that artists act in the world. And Todd and I were looking at, can we start to look at what are the paths that artists take ideas to action, and how do they kind of orient themselves and develop pathways? And some of those are some of the things that I talked about. Artist experiment, that becomes a particular pathway. They might narrate, they may engage in narrative, they explore different perspectives, they observe and share their observations and make things visible. They think about interventions and slice through or enter into a moment. Artists also do a lot of persuading and changing of the norm, changing of a worldview. So these are ways that we look at, how do artists engage in the world, and how do we use that mode of proactive engagement as teachers and students in the classroom. So just an example of my own practice, if we're looking at what would an artist do. Given the current situation we are in today, I have been working on a protest poster kit and a protest postcard kit. And these are some ways that I've been working in my accordion book around it. I've explored and mapped the kinds of things I want to do, and then I'm starting to play with some images that I want to begin to use and extend in my practice. So this is just an example of taking an idea and extending it into practice. I also want to mark for you the work of Kenya Hara. He comes more from the design field, and he has written this fantastic book called X-Formation. And through his process in X-Formation, Kenya Hara engages with how do we engage with art and design as ways to show what we don't know versus continuing to just show what we do know. So this last approach I want to share with you is one of getting out of your own way. It's strategies for getting unstuck, getting out of a zone of judgment, getting out of being caught in false binaries or dualities, and also strategies for playing. So, Todd and I call this getting out of your own way, trusting the process and resisting closure. Many artists and creative practitioners really have to work towards keeping themselves open, keeping themselves unstuck. And sometimes that's a hard process. We constantly get caught in it. And I want to read a poem that we kind of took from the Taoist master Lao Tzu. And it's about engaging with duality. And he says, "Everybody on earth knowing that beauty is beautiful makes ugliness. Everybody knowing that goodness is good makes wickedness. For being and non-being arise together. Hard and easy complete each other. Long and short shape each other. High and low depend on each other. Note and voice make the music together. Before and after follow each other. That's why the wise soul does without doing, teaches without talking, and things of this world exist. They are. You can't refuse them. To bear and not to own, to act and not to lay claim, to do the work and let it go, for just letting go is what makes it stay." And we actually cycle back in this to the act of engaging in your accordion books as a way to get unstuck, as a way to start to get through blocks and work through your process, your creative process and creative reflective practice. I want to mark an artist here that is not a visual artist. He is a theater artist and very famous for his work, Augusto Boal. And Boal's work has been a lot about demechanizing the mind, moving away from the conditioning that we get steeped into based on our education, our social systems. And he has a whole range of games that really help us demechanize the mind. So that's a book that I want to mark over here. So in closing, I just want to mark these 5 approaches and point out again that these are not 5 steps or in any way linear. You might engage with exchange and things talk to me, exchange and things talk to me, and continue to cycle between the two. Or you may jump around, but these are more 5 approaches, 5 points you want to mark in your process. So to recap, things talk to me, being alert to what grabs and holds my attention, mapping the terrain, exploring, guiding, and getting lost. Exchange, what happens in an exchange? What would an artist do, teachers and students as contemporary artists? And getting out of my own way, trusting the process and resisting closure. We hope that these series of videos here have been helpful to you in your creative inquiry and your creative practice as well as your reflective process. So if you want to find out more about what we do and also access more resources for your own practice, please check us out at www.accordionbookproject.com.